My neighbor knocked on my door at 4 a.m. and whispered, "Don't go to work today. Please, trust me." 12 hours later, the reason revealed itself with shocking clarity. And believe me, the last 6 months have been dedicated to unraveling what really happened that day. I collected testimonies, gathered evidence, delved deep, and what I discovered will force you to question everything you think about luck, fate, and the invisible web that connects our lives. Before we proceed, if you've ever felt a shiver down your spine that guided or saved you, leave a like on this video and tell me in the comments, from what city are you following this story? I've always considered myself a born skeptic. For me, only what could be seen and touched was real. Horoscopes, superstitions, nonsense. My life was an equation of numbers and data. As a financial analyst for 8 years, my routine was like a Swiss watch. Wake up at 5:30 a.m., black coffee, and by 6:45 a.m., I was already on my way to the office. A perfectly predictable existence, until that fateful autumn Thursday. It was exactly 4:12 a.m. when furious knocking echoed through my apartment. It wasn't the polite knocking of someone asking a favor. These were urgent, almost desperate punches that ripped through the night's silence. My heart raced 1,000 miles an hour. No one knocks on your door at that hour to announce good news. My mind began to project the worst scenarios: robbery, fire, a devastating medical emergency. I got out of bed with trembling legs, my body on high alert. I looked through the peephole and almost collapsed. It was Elias, my next-door neighbor. We were the good morning and good night neighbors in the elevator, a quick nod, but we had never exchanged more than 2 words. He was a reserved, somewhat solitary man who worked from home on something technology-related. I opened the door, keeping the security chain on. Elias was livid, cold sweat dripped down his face, and his eyes held an expression of terror that would never leave my memory. He fixed his gaze on mine and with a choked voice said, "I know this might sound absurd, but you cannot go to work today. Please, trust me. Stay home. It's crucial." I tried to question, to understand, but he just shook his head, saying he couldn't explain, that understanding would come later. Before I could articulate another word, he was already back in his apartment, the door closing with a dry click. I stood there, motionless, immersed in overwhelming confusion. My first instinct was to call the police. A man invading my dawn with such an enigmatic warning, it sounded like a suspense movie plot. But there was something in Elias's desperation, in the authenticity of his fear, that made me hesitate. It didn't seem like a threat, but a genuine concern. I went back to the bedroom, but sleep had fled from me. I stared at the ceiling, the gears of my mind turning nonstop. At 5:30 a.m., the alarm rang, and I was still at an impasse. My reason screamed for me to ignore the bizarre episode and follow my routine, but a deep voice, that intuition we rarely listen to, begged me to stay. For the first time in 8 years, I picked up my cell phone and called my boss, inventing a flimsy excuse about sudden discomfort. The morning dragged on in a fog of nervousness. I paced back and forth in the apartment, peeking out the window, checking the news, listening for any strange noise. Nothing, absolutely nothing. I started to feel like a fool. I had wasted a day of work because of a neighbor who was probably facing some kind of problem. I was already grabbing my car keys, thinking of going to work in the afternoon, when my cell phone exploded with messages from the company group. My stomach dropped as I read the first message. "Guys, a terrible accident on Alameda Central. A truck lost its brakes and hit several cars at the traffic light." My blood froze in my veins. Alameda Central. That was exactly my route, at the exact moment I would have been passing through there. 6:53 a.m. according to the news. The photos that started circulating in the groups were devastating. 4 unrecognizable vehicles. 3 people were taken to the hospital in serious condition. One of them did not survive. The worst, the license plate of one of the cars belonged to Gabriel, a colleague who left at the same time and took the same route as me. He was among the seriously injured. My knees buckled and I had to sit down. If I had gone to work, I would have been in the middle of that tragedy, perhaps in a hospital bed, or worse. Elias had saved me, but how? How could he have known that would happen? I waited until noon, trying to process, searching for a logical explanation. There wasn't one. There was no way he could have known. With my heart pounding, I knocked on Elias's door. It took him about 5 minutes to answer. When he opened it, he looked exhausted, as if he hadn't slept in days.
I need to understand, I stammered. How did you know? He sighed deeply, invited me in, and what I saw inside that apartment left me even more perplexed. The walls were covered with papers, photos, maps, meticulous notes. It looked like the command center of an investigator obsessed with a complex case. Elias offered me coffee. His hands trembled as he poured. We sat at the table and he began to speak. "You'll think I'm crazy," he said. "Everyone does. But I have dreams. They're not ordinary dreams. They're visions. Imminent accidents, tragedies, specific situations. I see everything. The location, the time, the details. And when I wake up, I know it's going to happen." I looked at him, incredulous. It sounded like a movie plot. He continued before I could interrupt. "It started 3 years ago. At first, I ignored it. I thought they were just intense nightmares, until one of the dreams came true, exactly as I had seen it. A fire in a commercial building. 15 people died. I had seen everything 3 days before. Since then, every time I have these dreams, I try to warn people, but no one believes me." Elias showed me a thick notebook filled with notes, dates, times, detailed descriptions of accidents. Some were marked with a red X. "These happened," he explained. "There were dozens." I ran my hand over the pages, a shiver running down my spine. "But this makes no sense," I argued. "How can you see the future? That's impossible." He gave a sad smile. "I know, but it's real." I started investigating on my own. I took some dates from his notebook and searched news archives. My God, it was all there. Bus accident on East Highway on March 23rd. Canopy collapse at a shopping mall on June 7th. Gas station explosion on August 15th. Every event Elias had noted, every premonition had come true on the exact date at the exact time. It was impossible, but it was real. I returned to Elias's apartment a few days later. We needed to talk more. "Elias," I asked, "if you can see these things before they happen, why don't you warn the authorities? Why don't you try to stop them?" He laughed, a humorless laugh. "Do you think I haven't tried? I've been to police stations, I've called the fire department, I've sent anonymous emails to newspapers. They either ignore me completely or think I'm crazy. Once I was almost arrested on suspicion of involvement." He opened a drawer and showed me medical prescriptions, psychiatric reports. "I went to 5 different psychologists," he continued. 3 diagnosed delusional disorder. One said it was post-traumatic stress. Another filled me with medication that left me in a zombie state. I stopped everything because I know it's not an illness. I know it's real. And you are the first person who survived because you believed me, even without understanding." I spent weeks visiting Elias regularly. He showed me how his glimpses worked. Usually, the dreams came between 3 and 7 days before the event. He would wake up with all the details etched in his mind, writing everything down immediately. Locations, characteristics of the people involved, even the weather of the day. The precision was disturbing. The worst part was that he couldn't stop anything, only watch. One night, Elias called me at 2 a.m. His voice was filled with despair. "I had another dream. Tomorrow afternoon, an accident involving children, a school van." My heart pounded. "Where? When exactly?" He gave me all the details. 5:20 p.m., intersection of Seoul Avenue and Esperanza Street. The van would try to run the yellow light, but a car speeding from the perpendicular street would hit it squarely on the side. We had to do something. The next day at 4:45 p.m., we were both standing at that intersection. We had a desperate plan. When I saw the van approaching, I would cross the pedestrian lane very slowly, forcing the cars to stop. Anything to delay, to change the sequence of events. My whole body was shaking. If it went wrong, I could be hit. But these were children. I had to try. 5:18 p.m., the yellow van turned the corner. My stomach churned. It was really happening, exactly as Elias had predicted. I waited for it to approach the yellow light. When it accelerated to pass, I stepped into the crosswalk. The driver honked furiously but braked. The van stopped. And then, coming from the other street, a black sedan sped through the intersection like lightning. If the van had gone forward, it would have been hit head-on. The van driver got out shouting at me, irritated by the scare I gave him. I could only stare at that black car disappearing down the avenue. Elias was on the other side of the street, leaning against a pole, crying. We had done it. For the first time, he had managed to change something. Those 15 children inside the van would never know how close they came to tragedy, and perhaps it was better that way. But there was a problem. 2 days later, Elias called me again. His voice was different, scared in a new way. There were consequences. We changed the future, and now I'm seeing worse things. The van accident didn't happen, but now I see other tragedies, as if the universe is readjusting, and I don't know if we did the right thing. My blood ran cold. What do you mean by worse things? He showed me new notes. After we prevented the accident, he started having different dreams, more intense, more violent, as if by changing one event, we had created a wave of unforeseen consequences. So, is there a price for changing destiny? I asked. He remained silent for a long time. I don't know, but I'm starting to understand why these visions came to me. Maybe it's not to change. Maybe it's just to observe. In the following weeks, I became obsessed with understanding what was happening. I researched similar cases, premonitions, precognitive dreams. I found reports throughout human history. People who dreamed of the Titanic before it sank, others who canceled flights that later crashed, but nothing as consistent and detailed as what Elias experienced. He was different, special or cursed, depending on your point of view. One day, 3 months after it all began, Elias appeared at my door. It was early morning, but not as early as that first time. He held an envelope. "I need to show you something," he said. Inside was a photo of me, taken from a distance, across the street from my building. On the back of the photo, a date, September 23rd, 3 years ago. "What is this?" I asked, confused. He took a deep breath. "3 years ago, I had my first dream, and you were in it. I saw you dying in that accident. I saw all the details. Your car being hit, the windows exploding. Everything was so real that I woke up screaming. The next day, I followed you. I took this photo to make sure it was you, and spent 3 years waiting for that date, September 23rd, the date of the accident I prevented. My world spun. Are you saying you knew me 3 years ago? That you knew I was going to die and waited all this time?" He nodded. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should interfere. All the other dreams I had seen only days before, but yours was different, years before, as if the universe was preparing me, giving me time. "For what?" I asked. "For me to decide if you were worth saving." I remained silent, processing the overwhelming information. "So all this was planned?" He shook his head. "Not planned, but perhaps destined. I don't know what to believe anymore. What I do know is that you were destined to die that day, and I changed that. Now you are alive, and the van full of children also did not crash, but every change has a price, and I still don't know what the price of these will be." "Why did you choose me?" I asked. "So many people you saw in your dreams, so much tragedy. Why did you decide to save me?" He looked out the window, thoughtful. "Because in the dream, in the wreckage of your car, I saw a note you had written to your son, telling him you loved him, that he should be strong. And I thought, what kind of person writes a letter like that every day, just in case something happens?" Tears began to stream down my face. I really did write those notes. Every day, since my son was born, I left a different note in my wallet. It was my way of dealing with anxiety, my way of ensuring that if something happened to me, he would know he was loved until the last second. Elias continued. "I saw that note and thought, this guy deserves to live, deserves to see his son grow up. So I waited, I planned, and when the day came, I was ready." We were silent for a long time. Finally, I asked the only question that still mattered. "And now, what do we do?" He sighed. "Now you live. Live the life that should have ended. Enjoy every second with your son. And as for me, I continue to have dreams. I continue to make notes, but I've learned that we shouldn't always interfere. Some things need to happen. The universe has its own balance. 6 months have passed since that day. I continue to go to work along the same central avenue, but it has never been the same. Every time I pass that intersection, I remember the accident that didn't happen, the lives that were saved. Elias continues to be my neighbor. We continue to greet each other in the elevator, but now there is an invisible bond between us, a deep connection. He gave me the greatest gift anyone can give, time. Time with my son, time to live. And as for his dreams, they continue. Elias told me that he learned to live with them. He no longer tries to change everything.
Choose carefully when to interfere, because you understood that the future is not fixed, but it is also not completely malleable. There is a delicate balance, and playing God has consequences. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is accept that we cannot save everyone, only those we truly need to save. This morning, when I left for work, Elias was at his apartment door. We exchanged our usual nod, but today he smiled, a genuine, relieved smile, and I understood. Whatever price he is paying for saving me, for changing my destiny, it was worth it to him. Because in the end, that's what makes us human. Not our ability to see the future or change destiny, but our choice to try, even when the odds seem impossible. So that's it. This is my story. The story of how my neighbor knocked on my door at 4 a.m. and changed everything. How I discovered that the impossible is real, that there are things in this world that science cannot explain, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the universe gives us a second chance. Not for everyone, not always, but when it does, we need to make the most of every second, because we never know when time will run out. If you've made it this far, thank you very much for listening to my story to the end. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had a premonition that saved your life? Have you ever made a decision for no apparent reason that later made perfect sense? I'm curious to know. And if you're listening to this, driving, working, or doing anything else, comment where you're listening from right now. See you in the next video. Hugs!